The badge reader chirps green, and the glass door unlocks with that soft, obedient click it always makes. The lobby smells like burnt espresso and new carpet glue. I can hear the Friday playlist someone put on in the kitchen, something upbeat that doesn't match the way my stomach feels. I walk past the reception desk with a thin envelope in my hand. A woman from finance looks up and smiles like it's just another day. I smile back. Because in exactly 72 hours, the biggest client launch of Meridian Ridge Solutions' entire year is going to fall apart in public, and they're going to blame the wrong person. And that's the part that still makes me laugh. Not out loud. I'm not dramatic. Just internally, quietly, like a fuse burning. My phone buzzes. It's a calendar alert. Gia Live War Room. Final readiness check. Friday, 9 a.m. I keep walking. I can already hear him in my head, the man who thinks he's about to inherit my career like it's a family cabin. Let's keep it high level. We're moving fast. We don't need all the legacy detail. Legacy detail. That's what he calls the last 12 years of my life. My name is Lauren Pierce. I'm 46 years old. And for exactly 12 years, 7 months, and 19 days, I was the person Meridian Ridge Solutions relied on when things couldn't fail. Until they decided I was an operational redundancy. They used that phrase in a meeting like it was a compliment. Operational redundancy. Like I was extra. Like I was optional. So I did the one thing they never planned for. I removed the optional part. Me. And I did it at the worst possible moment. On purpose. I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened. Names, dates, numbers. Every inch of the slow, polite betrayal that corporate people are so good at. And the calm, surgical exit that followed. Because I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten. I just planned. And then I left. I started at Meridian Ridge Solutions in October of 2012. Back then, we were a 63-person consultancy operating out of a converted warehouse on South Congress in Austin, Texas. Exposed brick, cheap standing desks, founders who wore hoodies to meetings with bank executives and acted like it was culture. By the time the story begins, we were 214 employees, occupying 3 floors of a glass and steel office building downtown, the kind with silent elevators and conference rooms named after mountains no one on our team had ever climbed. We built enterprise workflow software for healthcare networks. Not the kind of apps people download for fun. The kind of systems that decide whether a surgical authorization gets approved, whether a claim gets flagged, whether a provider gets paid in 14 days or 90. We were small enough to be agile and big enough to be dangerous. My role was Senior Program Director for Client Delivery. That meant I wasn't writing code anymore, but I was responsible for everything that touched a client launch: requirements, configuration, integrations, security reviews, training, change management, and the part no one puts on slides: keeping executives calm when their organizations start panicking. For 12 years, I built the delivery machine. I built the Meridian Launch Cadence, a documented process for rolling out new systems across multi-site healthcare networks with a 90-day runway and a go-live week that didn't feel like a controlled explosion. I built the Ridgeline Risk Register, a dashboard that tracked 137 individual risk types, from credentialing mismatch to payer remittance mapping anomaly, with an escalation protocol that forced our leadership to acknowledge problems before they became fires. I built the Atlas cutover protocol, a step-by-step playbook for migrating live data from legacy systems into our platform without corrupting authorizations, claims history, or provider rosters. It had exact timing windows, fallback triggers, and what we called stop-the-line rules, the moments when you paused everything because pushing forward would do more harm than a delay. And I built the Greystone Client Ledger, which wasn't just a spreadsheet. It was a relationship map. Every client stakeholder, their influence level, their fears, their hidden agendas, and the exact phrases that calmed them down. My team's metrics were not nice to have. We ran 17 major implementations in 2023. We hit on I'm Go Live on 16 of them. The one we didn't hit was delayed by 3 weeks because the client failed a security audit on their own network segmentation. I can still tell you the date of that audit and the name of the auditor because that's how my brain works. We maintained a 96.4% client renewal rate across our portfolio for 4 straight years. We reduced average post-launch critical incidents from 41 in the first month down to 9. Not by luck, by process. And yes, I made sacrifices. Not the romantic kind. The quiet kind that shows up as absence. I hadn't taken a full week off in 3 years. The last time I attempted it, I ended up on a tower call from the back seat of a rental car while my sister drove my niece to a birthday party. I missed my goddaughter's recital because a client CFO decided at 6 p.m. on a Thursday that he wanted one last review of a statement of work. I worked through Thanksgiving twice. Not because anyone asked. Because I knew what would happen if I didn't. I was the person who caught the problem before it became a headline. I was also the person who never demanded applause for it. That's the kind of employee corporate leaders love. Right up until they don't. The Nepotism hire arrived in January. His name was Dylan Rourke. He was 31 years old. He wore expensive sneakers with suits. He said Stanford in the first 30 seconds of every introduction, even though he went there for an MBA, not medical school, and we weren't curing cancer. Dylan wasn't officially titled COO's nephew on the org chart, but that's what he was. Our COO, Nathan Rourke, had built his entire persona around operational excellence. He spoke in frameworks. He liked to say, "We're a platform company," like it meant something. Nathan also liked his family. He hired Dylan as Director of Strategic Transformation. That title meant nothing. It was a sandbox title, designed to float above the actual work so he could take credit when things went well and blame when they didn't. Dylan's incompetence wasn't loud. It was slick, the kind that hides behind jargon. He'd mispronounce basic healthcare terms, like calling a prior authorization a pre-authentication, and then laugh as if the mistake was charming. He'd refer to HL7 as HL7, like it was a highway. He'd call data mapping the spreadsheet thing. And the worst part was how confident he was while being wrong. The first time I met him was in the West Summit conference room, the one with the long walnut table and the glass wall facing the river. Nathan introduced him like he was a gift. "This is Dylan," Nathan said, clapping him on the shoulder. "He's going to be helping us level up. He sees the world differently." Dylan smiled at me like we were peers. "Lauren, right?" he said. "I've heard you're the process queen." I blinked once. "Program director," I said. "Yes." He laughed. "Same thing. Look, I'm here to streamline. We need to eliminate friction. We need to stop over-engineering launches." Over-engineering. That was his favorite insult. He used it every time he encountered something he didn't understand. 3 weeks later, I discovered I was being replaced. Not through a conversation. Not through a performance review. Through a slide deck. It was a Tuesday for 26 p.m. I was walking past the smaller meeting room near the kitchen, the one called Cedar Peak, and I saw my name on the screen through the glass. Delivery Leadership Transition Plan. I stopped. Inside the room were Nathan, Dylan, our HR Director Margot Sweeney, and our CEO, Elise Harmon. Elise looked tired. Nathan looked pleased. Dylan looked like someone had told him he was about to be crowned. I didn't mean to listen, but my name was on a slide, and the door was slightly open. I heard Dylan say, "We need to reduce single-threaded dependencies. Lauren's a risk concentration. The model should be scalable. We're shifting from hero culture to systems." Hero culture. That was cute, because I was the system. Nathan said, "We'll position it as a development path. Dylan will take over delivery strategy. Lauren can focus on documentation and process maintenance." It's a win-win. Documentation and process maintenance. Translation: train your replacement and then sit quietly until we figure out how to get you to leave. Margot, in her gentle HR voice, said, "We can frame it as role evolution. No one wants to feel demoted." Dylan laughed. "She won't mind. She's loyal." Elise didn't speak. She just stared at the screen like she was watching an inevitable storm. I walked away before anyone saw me. I went to my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote one line. Friday before go live. Because I knew immediately what I was going to do. Not impulsively. Not emotionally. Strategically. And if my story resonates with you, make sure to like and subscribe. I share real workplace revenge stories and survival strategies every week that might just change your professional life. What Dylan didn't know is that I had been preparing for this exact kind of corporate betrayal for years, not because I'm paranoid, but because I'm observant. I'm the kind of person who notices patterns. And one pattern is consistent across every company. When leadership starts talking about single points of failure, they aren't actually worried about business continuity. They're worried about you. So 3 years earlier, on March 3rd, 2021, I made a decision that seemed small at the time. I rewrote a clause in our master services agreement template. Not in a dramatic way. Not a hidden trap. Just language that protected clients and, incidentally, protected me. It was called Clause 12C. The clause already existed. It was an old section about implementation ownership and transition obligations. Most executives never read it because it lived between limitation of liability and force majeure. I worked with our legal counsel at the time, Irene Kappelman, a precise, unsmiling attorney who treated contract language like it was surgery. We added a sentence. Exact language. Client acknowledges that implementation and cutover services are performed by designated key personnel. Any substitution of designated key personnel within 14 calendar days of a scheduled go-live date requires client's prior written consent. Absent such consent, client may elect to postpone go-live without penalty and may terminate the statement of work for convenience with a prorated refund of implementation fees. 14 days. Prior written consent. Terminate for convenience. Prorated refund. At the time, we justified it as protecting the client from last-minute staffing changes. Which was true. We were in healthcare. Staff continuity mattered. But it also meant that if Meridian tried to swap me out at the last second, the client could legally walk away. And it also meant something else. It meant that if Meridian chose to push me out quietly right before a launch, the client's contract gave them a clean exit that would hurt Meridian badly. I didn't hide Clause 12C. It wasn't secret. It was just ignored. The other thing Dylan didn't know was that I controlled access to the systems that made go-live possible. Not because I was trying to hoard power, but because that's how it evolved. Our Atlas cutover protocol required a specific sequence of actions across 3 systems: the Med-Access Integration Gateway, the Ridgeline Risk Register, and the Northbridge Authorization Engine. The Integration Gateway managed all inbound and outbound data feeds. If it wasn't configured correctly, authorizations wouldn't sync, claims would stall, providers would see wrong patient data. The Risk Register was the launch war room dashboard. It contained escalation contacts, risk ownership, and the stop-the-line rules. The authorization engine handled real-time prior authorization decisions during go-live week. It had a fallback mode that could keep approvals flowing if there was a mapping mismatch. All 3 systems had administrative access controlled through Okta groups. And those Okta groups were tied to my role, not because I demanded it, but because I was the person who set up the groups and no one ever bothered to change them. I also kept what I called the Greystone notes. Not official documentation. Not company property. Just my personal relationship map. Names, preferences, political landmines. The exact phrasing that soothed a panicking hospital COO. The unspoken rivalries between client departments. The quiet warnings a compliance director would give me when something was about to explode. It lived in a private, encrypted notebook. My notebook. My memory. And here's the part that matters most. I did not sabotage anything. I did not build a kill switch. I did not delete systems. I simply understood that if leadership wanted to replace me, they needed me to cooperate. They needed me to transfer knowledge. They needed documentation. They needed continuity. And if they wanted to treat me like a replaceable component, then I would behave like one. Components do not write transition memos. Components are removed. And systems suffer the consequences. 2 days later, Dylan scheduled a sync with me. Wednesday, 10 a.m. He booked a glass conference room and brought a latte like he was hosting a podcast. He sat down, crossed his ankle over his knee, and smiled. "Lauren, I'm excited," he said. "We're going to modernize delivery. We're going to unlock efficiencies." I nodded. Understood. He opened his laptop. So, I'd love you to start capturing your process. We need institutional knowledge. We can't have everything living in your head. Agreed, I said. Dylan blinked. He expected resistance. He expected an argument. So you're on board? He asked. I looked at him. You said you wanted systems. Systems require documentation. I can document. He relaxed. Perfect. We'll create a knowledge base. We'll turn you into, like, a center of excellence. A center of excellence. That's what he offered me. A corner. A label. A shelf. He continued, also, I'm going to start joining more client calls. I want to be the strategic face. The clients prefer continuity, I said. They'll adapt, he said, waving his hand. They're buying outcomes, not personalities. That was the moment I realized he didn't understand healthcare clients at all. Healthcare clients absolutely buy personalities. They buy trust. They buy the calm voice that tells them at 2 a.m. that the system will not collapse. Dylan didn't have that voice. He had a slide deck voice. After the meeting, he sent me an email. Subject: Delivery Documentation Plan. Lauren, can you please deliver draft documentation for Atlas cutover protocol and client escalation contacts by end of day Friday? Also, please begin transition notes for Greenbrook Health Go Live, scheduled June 17th. Greenbrook Health. That was our biggest annual project. A multi-site healthcare network in Northern California with 19 clinics and 3 hospitals, implementing our platform across authorizations, claims workflows, and provider credentialing. The contract was worth $5,084,000 annually, plus $1,740,000 in implementation fees. Go Live was Monday, June 17th. And Dylan just asked me to write the documents that would allow him to replace me. I wrote back one word. Sure. Then I did nothing. Not nothing at work. I did my job. I kept the project moving. I kept Greenbrook calm. I handled issues. I attended every meeting. But I did not write transition documentation. I did not create the handoff Dylan wanted. I let him believe I was capturing my process. Because Dylan's favorite assumption was that quiet people are obedient. And my favorite reality is that quiet people are watching. 3 days later, Friday afternoon, 4:58 p.m., Dylan emailed again. Hey Lauren, quick reminder on docs. Need them to keep momentum. I looked at the email. I looked at the clock. I looked at my empty calendar for the weekend, which was never actually empty. I replied, working on it. I wasn't lying. I was working on something. I was working on my exit. That night at 9:12 p.m., I opened a separate folder in my personal cloud storage and exported my own notes. Not company documents, not proprietary code, just my relationship maps, my personal reminders, my memory scaffolding. Because I knew the day would come when someone would ask, can you just tell us who to call? And I wanted to be able to answer honestly. No. Saturday morning, I applied to 3 positions. Sunday afternoon, I took a call with a recruiter while stirring pasta sauce. By Monday, I had an interview scheduled. Meridian Ridge had no idea. They saw me as stable, predictable, loyal. They thought loyalty was a personality trait. It's not. It's an agreement. 2 weeks later, Dylan held a delivery transformation workshop with my team. He booked the largest conference room, Alpine, and ordered catered sandwiches like he was hosting an election night. He stood at the front with a clicker. On his slide, in big letters, it said, de-risking launch, eliminate dependencies. He looked at me mid-sentence, like he wanted to demonstrate dominance. We have a dependency issue, he said. Lauren is basically the hub. I could hear my team shifting in their chairs. My deputy program manager, Tessa Nguyen, stared at the table. Tessa was 39, sharp, and tired of watching incompetent people get promoted. Dylan continued, we can't keep scaling if we have single-threaded leadership. We need redundancy. He pronounced redundancy like it was a moral virtue. Then he said, Lauren will be transitioning into a process stewardship role. I'll be taking over strategic delivery oversight. Strategic delivery oversight. That's what he called my job. He didn't say demotion. He didn't say replacement. He said transition. After the workshop, Tessa followed me to my office. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I closed my door. I'm fine, I said. You don't look fine. I'm clear, I corrected. Tessa leaned against the door frame. He doesn't know what he's doing. No, I said. He doesn't. Are you going to fight this? I thought about it. The formal complaints. The political games. The HR meetings where everyone speaks in soft voices and nothing changes. No, I said. Tessa's eyebrows lifted. Then what are you going to do? I looked at her and said the truth softly. I'm going to leave. Tessa swallowed. When? I stared at my calendar where June 17th was circled in my mind like a target. At the worst possible time, I said. Tessa didn't smile. She didn't laugh. She just nodded like she understood. Because Tessa had been quiet too. And quiet people understand leverage. By early June, the pressure intensified. Greenbrook's executive team was nervous. Their CIO, Dr. Raj Patel, wanted assurances. Their compliance director, Marlene Ochoa, kept asking about audit logs. Their revenue cycle VP, Dana Klein, was worried about claim denials during go-live week. I handled all of it. I kept them calm. I answered questions. I coordinated with our engineers. I pushed internal teams to fix issues before they became visible. Dylan started inserting himself into calls. He'd join 10 minutes late and speak for the first 5, repeating what I'd just said with slightly different words. He'd say things like, "We're basically leveraging AI-driven risk mitigation." There was no AI involved. He'd say, "We've built an omni-channel compliance pipeline." No. We had a checklist and 2 dedicated security analysts. He'd say, "We're streamlining stakeholder alignment." That meant he was talking and not listening. After one particularly painful call, Dana Klein pulled me aside in a private message. "Lauren, is Dylan going to be our primary post-go-live contact?" I stared at that message for a long time. Because in that moment, Dana wasn't asking about Dylan. She was asking if she could trust Meridian Ridge. I replied, "During go-live week, I will be your primary." That was true at the time I typed it. It wouldn't be true a week later. Then, on June 6th, Dylan sent me a calendar invite. Subject: Transition Review and Role Alignment. Friday, June 7th, 3:30 p.m. It was the Friday before go-live. I accepted the invite. And I smiled. Because Dylan had unknowingly scheduled my resignation meeting for the exact moment I wanted it. Friday, June 7th arrived with the kind of heat Austin likes to throw at you like an insult. The air outside felt thick, like you could chew it. The office, meanwhile, was cold. Over-air-conditioned. The kind of cold that makes you feel like you're working inside a refrigerator built for corporate feelings. At 9 a.m., we held the final go-live readiness check. The war room was crowded. Screens showed checklists. Engineers looked tired. Account managers looked nervous. Someone kept clicking a pen like they were trying to puncture reality. Dylan sat at the head of the table. He said, "Okay, team, big energy. Monday is our Super Bowl." Someone laughed too loudly. I watched him. The expensive sneakers. The confident posture. The way he spoke like outcomes were summoned through enthusiasm. When it was my turn to speak, I said, "Cutover begins at 1 a.m. Central on Monday. Data freeze at 10 p.m. Sunday. We have 3 critical integration points that must remain stable: eligibility, claims remittance, and provider roster synchronization." Dylan nodded like he understood. He didn't. At 3:30 p.m., I walked into his office. Nathan was there too. COO Nathan Rourke, sitting in the corner chair, arms crossed, watching like this was a performance. Dylan gestured to a seat. "Lauren, thanks. This should be quick." He looked at his laptop. "We're aligning roles. Starting Monday, I'll be the executive owner for Greenbrook. You'll be in a support capacity. We want the client to see strategic leadership." Strategic leadership. Nathan smiled. Dylan continued, "Also, we need your documentation. It's been a gap. We can't keep operating with tribal knowledge." Tribal knowledge. That's what he called my expertise. I pulled the thin envelope out of my bag and set it on his desk. Dylan frowned. "What's this?" "My resignation," I said. He laughed once, like it was a joke. Then he opened it. The color drained from his face in slow motion. He looked up. "No. Lauren, no. You can't." "My last day is today," I said. Nathan sat up. Lauren, this is extremely unprofessional. I nodded once. It's at-will employment. Dylan's voice cracked slightly. We have go live on Monday. Yes, I said. You do. Nathan leaned forward, anger tightening his jaw. This is sabotage. I looked at him calmly. You groomed your nephew to replace me. Dylan's eyes widened. Nathan's mouth opened, then closed. I continued. You called me a risk concentration. You told HR I'd transition into process maintenance. You planned to reduce me to documentation. Nathan's voice went low. How do you know that? I listen, I said. Dylan stood up. Lauren, okay, let's not be reactive. We can discuss compensation. We can discuss title. We can. No, I said. Just that. No. Dylan's hands started moving, gesturing in the air like he could rearrange reality. Lauren, be reasonable. We'll give you a retention bonus. 25,000. 50. Whatever. Just get us through Go Live. I tilted my head slightly. You didn't value me last week. Nathan stood too. If you walk out right now, you're burning bridges. I nodded again. I understand. Dylan's voice got sharper. Where's the documentation? Where are the cutover notes? Where's the contact map? You have to leave something. I looked at him. You wanted to eliminate dependencies. Silence. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I could hear my own heartbeat steady like a metronome. Then I said, congratulations. Dependency eliminated. And I stood up. Nathan stepped toward the door like he might block me. He didn't. Not because he was kind, but because he knew the legal line. Dylan's voice followed me. Lauren, please. Don't do this. I paused at the doorway and looked back at him. I'm not doing anything, I said. You did. Then I walked out. At 3:47 p.m. on Friday, June 7th, I handed my badge to HR. At 4:06 p.m., my access was revoked. At 4:20 p.m., I sat in my car in the garage and let the silence settle over me like a blanket. Not triumph. Peace. The first call came at 6:12 p.m. Friday. Dylan. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Lauren, it's Dylan. Listen, we need to talk. This isn't funny. We need your help. Just call me back. Please. At 7:03 p.m., Nathan called. I didn't answer. At 8:15 p.m., Tessa texted me. They're panicking. Dylan just asked what HL7 stands for. I stared at the text, then set my phone down. Saturday morning, I woke up to 15 missed calls. One from Marlene Ochoa, Greenbrook Compliance. One from Dana Klein, Revenue Cycle. Two from Dr. Raj Patel, the CIO. They had my number because I'd given it to them during crisis moments. Because that's what you do when you care about outcomes. I listened to Dana's voicemail. Lauren, hi. It's Dana. I'm being told you're no longer with Meridian Ridge. Is that true? Because we have go live in 48 hours. I need to understand who's running cutover. Please call me. My chest tightened. Not guilt. Not shame. Just the quiet ache of knowing I had been the bridge between competence and chaos, and now the bridge was gone. I didn't call back. Because if I called back, I would be doing the thing they expected. Saving them. Rescuing them. And I wasn't their employee anymore. Sunday night, Dylan emailed me from his personal Gmail. Subject, urgent, Greenbrook Go Live. Lauren, I'm asking you as a human. We're in a critical situation. We need your guidance for the Atlas cutover protocol. We can pay you as a contractor. Name your rate. Please respond. I read it once. Then I replied with one sentence. My consulting rate is $1,250 per hour, minimum 20 hours prepaid. All work subject to Clause 12C and client consent. I didn't add emotion. I didn't add sarcasm. Just terms. 5 minutes later, Dylan called. I answered. Lauren, he said, breathless. Okay, fine. We'll do it. We'll pay. Just tell me what to do. I could hear people in the background. Voices. Panic. I said, you can't hire me without Greenbrook's consent within 14 days of go live. Dylan's silence was sharp. What? He whispered. Clause 12C, I said. Key personnel substitution. Client consent required. If not, client can postpone go live and terminate for convenience with a refund. Dylan's voice rose. That clause is for staffing changes. You're not staffing, I'm key personnel, I said. You just told everyone I was a dependency. Another pause. Then Dylan said, Okay, we'll get consent. We'll call them. Good luck, I said. And I hung up. Before I tell you what happened next, you might be wondering how I stayed calm while they spiraled. That's exactly what I'll be covering in next week's video, so make sure you're subscribed. Monday, June 10th, 12:58 a.m. Central. Cutover time. I know the exact minute because Tessa texted me a photo of the war room clock. They're starting, she wrote. At 1:17 a.m., the first failure hit. Eligibility feed stalled. The MedAccess integration gateway threw error codes related to certificate validation. Someone had attempted to rotate an API certificate without updating the downstream endpoint mapping. It was fixable, if you knew where to look. At 1:42 a.m., the provider roster sync failed. A data mapping table labeled PROV_specialty_XREF had a mismatch because the client had updated specialty codes last quarter and no one reconciled them. Also fixable, if you remembered the detail. At 2:06 a.m., the Northbridge authorization engine started issuing denials for services that should have been auto-approved because the fallback rules weren't activated. Not fixable quickly without the rules and context. At 3:11 a.m., Dr. Raj Patel escalated to Meridian CEO, Elise Harmon, demanding Lauren Pierce, the person he trusted, be on the bridge. At 3:32 a.m., Elise called me. I answered. Not because I owed her, but because I wanted to hear her voice. Lauren, Elise said, and her voice was strained. We're in trouble. I know, I said. Greenbrook is furious. They're asking for you. Nathan and Dylan, they're not handling it well. I waited. Elise exhaled. What do you want? That was the question. Not, how can we fix this? Not, how can we make it right? What do you want? I said, I want my role back. With a title that matches what I've been doing. Vice President of Client Delivery. I want $278,000 base salary. I want a written agreement that Dylan is removed from delivery oversight. And I want my team protected from retaliation. Elise was quiet. Then she said, Lauren, I can't do all of that right now. I said, then I can't help. Lauren, Elise pleaded softly, we're going to lose this contract. I know, I said. And I meant it. I wasn't threatening. I wasn't punishing. I was stating reality. Elise's voice tightened. Nathan will never agree. I said, then Nathan will pay. Elise whispered, can I call you back? Of course, I said. At 6:20 a.m., GoLive officially began. Greenbrook's clinics started logging in. Authorizations stalled. Claims queues backed up. Providers couldn't see accurate rosters. By 8 a.m., Dana Klein sent an email to Meridian's leadership with the subject line, GeoLive failure, immediate action required. By 9:15 a.m., Greenbrook's legal counsel, Harriet Blum, issued a notice of breach and intent to invoke Clause 12C. They demanded Meridian postpone GoLive and provide a named key personnel replacement approved in writing. Meridian couldn't, because they'd replace me with someone Greenbrook didn't trust. At 10:06 a.m., Elise called me back. Her voice was different. Colder. Determined. Lauren, she said, the board is on an emergency call. Nathan and Dylan are on it too. I need you to join. I joined. I heard Nathan immediately. This is extortion, he said. This is a tantrum. I didn't respond to that. I didn't need to. A board member spoke, a woman named Carolyn Sutter, former CFO of a hospital network, voice like sharpened glass. Nathan, are you telling me you demoted the lead delivery executive 14 days before the company's largest go-live and didn't have a transition plan? Nathan stammered. We were modernizing. We were reducing dependencies. Carolyn said, you reduced your brain. Another board member, Victor Ames, asked, who wrote Clause 12C? Silence. I said I did. Victor paused. So you warned us, in a contract, that key personnel substitution without consent could trigger termination. Yes, I said. Carolyn asked, did anyone read it? No one answered. Dylan tried to speak. Look, the issue is. Carolyn cut him off. Dylan, I'm going to be blunt. What is your operational experience in healthcare delivery? Dylan's voice faltered. I have a Stanford MBA. Carolyn said, that's not an answer. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Victor spoke again. Lauren, what are your terms? I repeated them. Vice President of Client Delivery. $278,000 base. Dylan removed from delivery oversight. Team protected. Carolyn said, Nathan, can you accept? Nathan's voice was tight. We can discuss later. Carolyn said, now. Nathan snapped, this is absurd. We can't reward this behavior. Carolyn replied, we already rewarded your behavior. It cost us $5,084,000. That number hung in the air. Elise's voice was small. Nathan, we don't have a choice. Nathan went silent. Then Dylan spoke, desperation leaking through his polished tone. Lauren, please. Just help us get through today. We'll sort everything else out. I said, sign it. Within 37 minutes, Elise sent me a DocuSign package. I signed. At 11:02 a.m., my access was reinstated. At 11:13 a.m., I was on the bridge with Greenbrook. Dana Klein's voice came through, sharp and exhausted. Lauren. Thank God. I said, I'm here. Dr. Raj Patel asked, can you stabilize this? Yes, I said. But we're going to pause operations for 2 hours to prevent data corruption. Dylan tried to interject from Meridian's side. We can't pause, it'll look bad. I said, Dylan mute. And someone did. At 1:26 p.m., we corrected the certificate rotation and restarted the eligibility feed. At 2:04 p.m., we reconciled the provider's specialty codes and reran roster sync. At 2:41 p.m., we activated fallback rules in the Northbridge authorization engine. By 5:30 p.m., critical incident volume dropped from 63 to 11. Greenbrook was still furious. But they were functional. They didn't terminate that day. But the damage was done. Because the board had now seen, in real time, the cost of ego. They had seen the difference between a slide deck and competence. And they weren't going to ignore it. The next morning, Tuesday at 8:15 a.m., Dylan was removed from delivery oversight officially. His title was changed to Special Projects Advisor. That's corporate for go sit quietly. Nathan Rourke tried to protect him. He tried to frame it as restructuring. He tried to hold on to control. The board didn't let him. 2 weeks later, on June 24th, Nathan resigned to pursue opportunities. Dylan left the company 3 days after that. Greenbrook didn't renew the $5,084,000 annual contract at the end of the year. They reduced scope and moved part of their work to another vendor. Meridian Ridge lost $2,917,000 in projected expansion revenue because Greenbrook's trust was cracked. And all of it happened because two men thought competence was replaceable. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office. Same building, different floor, better view. My title on the glass read Vice President, Client Delivery. My base salary was $278,000. My bonus structure was tied to renewal performance and incident reduction. My team had expanded from 12 to 19 people. Tessa Nguyen was promoted to Director of Implementation Strategy with a salary that finally matched her brain. We rebuilt our documentation properly, not as a punishment, but as a system. We implemented shared ownership of key protocols. We trained backups. We made sure no one would ever again be set up as a single point of failure without being respected as one. The board also mandated a nepotism policy. Not because they suddenly became ethical saints, but because losing millions makes principles appear. Elise became a stronger CEO. Not kinder, necessarily. Just more aware of consequences. As for Dylan, I heard through the industry grapevine that he joined a venture-funded startup as Chief Operating Officer. He posted motivational content about leadership and resilience. The captions were inspirational. The comments were supportive. And I didn't feel anything. Not rage. Not triumph. Just a quiet recognition of how the world works. Nathan, the COO, took a strategic advisor role at a private equity firm. People like Nathan rarely face full consequences. They just relocate them. But in our company, in our corner of this industry, the lesson landed. Competence is not an accessory. It's infrastructure. Here's what I learned, and it's not a cliché. It's a practical truth. If you're the person holding everything together, the company will call you loyal right up until the day they decide your loyalty is convenient to exploit. They'll say they want systems, but what they mean is they want your knowledge without your power. They'll talk about redundancy, but what they want is replaceability. And if you let them do it, quietly, politely, they will. Not because they're evil villains twirling mustaches. Because most corporate betrayal isn't emotional. It's procedural. So protect yourself procedurally. Read your contracts. Understand your leverage. Document what serves you, not what makes you disposable. Build a life where your worth doesn't depend on someone else's mood or family tree. And when the moment comes, don't beg for respect. Select for it. If you've ever felt like the backbone of a company that treats you like spare parts, I hope my story gives you clarity and courage. And if you found something valuable in this story, please like and subscribe for more strategies on workplace survival, leverage, and winning without losing your composure. Remember, you don't get respected by working harder. You get respected by refusing to be treated as replaceable.